This video is sponsored by World of Warships. More on that in a moment. Roll the intro. We started this journey in 2019, and with Wrath of the Lich King Classic confirmed for 2022, it is time for another class retrospective series. During Vanilla we asked, was it any good though? In TBC we moved on to ask, is it any better now? And for Wrath, well, it's no longer a question of asking if your class is good or not, because every spec in the game is great at something. So we're going to be looking at what is new to your class baseline, the PvE talent changes as well as raiding, how well your class is expected to perform in raiding throughout the expansion, PvP performance in the arena, as well as taking a look at your tier sets. And then through this, hopefully we can give a proper answer to your class in Wrath of the Lich King Classic. Just how broken is it now? Before we make a start, I want to do a quick shout out to today's sponsor, World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play game available on PC that gets a bunch of updates monthly, from new cosmetics, ships, classes, playable nations, and more. There will always be something fresh and new to come back to. Experience top-notch graphics, dynamic weather and lighting, and a range of different conditions across over 40 maps. Explore and conquer the seas with multiple ship classes, from destroyers to aircraft carriers, cruisers, battleships, submarines, and many more. World of Warships also has the option to play solo or as part of a division with others. Beyond being just a game, World of Warships also aims to digitally recreate historical vessels from World War I and II, many of which never saw life beyond blueprints or designs in the virtual dockyard. Oh, and I nearly didn't mention, World of Warships is also available on consoles instead, if that's what you prefer. Download World of Warships below using my link in the description, and then register to enjoy a huge starter pack. Using code FIRE, you can get 200 doubloons, Premium Battleship USS Texas, 20 Restless Fire Camouflage, 1 million credits, and 7 days of a premium account, all for free. Many thanks to World of Warships for the sponsor. Let's talk WoW. The Rogue so far has had quite the journey throughout Classic's lifetime. Starting in the original game, they were a PvE powerhouse that was just as good in PvP content. In TBC, they grew even more powerful in PvP somehow, and arguably were the most consistent class found at high ratings across arena brackets. Yet in PvE, they often struggled to find their spots in raids. People saw them as a low utility class that was easily replaced by others who could outperform them. Well, that is until we started hitting late game TBC gearing and a certain set of legendary weapons, which also helped out quite a bit. So in Wrath of the Lich King, how will World of Warcraft's premier stealth and thievery class evolve? Let's check out the Rogue. So then, what is new to the class baseline? We need to start off with poisons. In Classic and TBC, they were quite honestly pretty lackluster. Yeah, they are great in PvP content, but more for their utility in applying a slow or a mortal strike type effect. At no point have they ever actually done damage. This is going to change by a lot. First up, you are not making your own poisons anymore. This is a shame, really. I'm not quite sure why this was taken away. They had already buffed poison durations to be an hour in TBC, so you didn't have to make all that many of them, and it was a fun little class fantasy thing. Nevertheless, in Wrath, the vendor that used to sell you your poison materials will now just instead sell them to you directly. Also, Vanish does not need a reagent anymore either, so more bag space for the Rogue, I guess. On top of that, you're going to be using a poison on your main hand and offhand all of the time. Wind Fury Totem now gives melee haste instead of that temporary buff that allowed extra attacks. Yes, rip Wind Fury Totem. And finally, poisons will now begin to scale in damage with the Rogue's attack power. So in short, poisons are really good. Make sure you have plenty on you all of the time. More or less every single poison has had minor to major changes as well. For mind numbing and crippling poison, the proc chance is now 50%, and the cast speed reduction effect on mind numbing is 30% down from 60. Instant poisons move to a proc per minute instead of a percentage chance depending on your weapon speed. Deadly poison now works the same, but once it's at 5 stacks, procs will instead apply your other weapons' poisons. These two poisons will contribute a significant portion of your DPS, especially as Assassination, which we will look at soon. An aesthetic poison which you probably didn't even know exists because it's completely useless in TBC now dispels an enrage effect if you desperately need that, and some fights do. Hunters usually deal with this though. Wound poison doesn't stack anymore, there's one application, 50% healing reduction. It's both better in that you don't need to stack it and worse in that it doesn't protect your other poisons. Energy is no longer gained in increments of 20 and will continuously regenerate. Haste also benefits energy regeneration, which it already did in TBC, but I think now it regenerates constantly, it's a little bit more noticeable. Aside from this, rogues have also learned the delicate and stealthy art of equipping axes. For Assassination, exposed armor now reduces armor by 20% instead of a flat value, and improved exposed armor now reduces the energy cost of this ability instead of making it more powerful, which puts exposed on equal footing with other abilities like Thunder Armor or a new Hunter pet ability, Acid Spit. You'll of course want one of these up when you're raiding, but it's not always going to be the rogue's job anymore, so that's some good news. Envenom gets buffed significantly throughout Wrath, and I'm glad it did because the whole mutilate rogue just never saw the light of day and was never viable at all at any point in TBC. Now on top of doing high nature damage, of course, which is bypassing armor, it will also dramatically increase the chance for you to apply poisons for a short duration afterwards. And most importantly, there is a talent, there's also a glyph, but you'll take the talent when you're Assassination, which stops Envenom from consuming your deadly poison stacks and absolutely ruining your DPS, which is vital. Dismantle is another new ability that removes all carried equipment from the target for 10 seconds. It's like Disarm, but better. A short cooldown and a low energy cost, it will remove shields in PvP against high armor targets, and the disarm effect was one of the few bits of utility which a rogue did not already have, and well, now they do. Over in the combat tree, rogues get something which historically in raiding has made them extremely overpowered. Feint on top of the threat reduction effect will now also make you take 50% less damage from AoE effects for 6 seconds. So essentially a rogue is going to survive practically any big AoE ability. Feint might not even be on your bar at the moment, but for Wrath the Lich King I would find somewhere where you can have it to hand. Combat also gets a new ability, Fan of Knives, costs 50 energy, hits enemies nearby around you, and does bonus damage if you have a dagger equipped. Fan of Knives will also apply your poisons. This finally gives all rogues access to a decent AoE effect. In Wrath, however, it doesn't build combo points, which is a shame, but hey, it's AoE and that is certainly better than nothing. For the Stealthy boys in the Subtlety tree, not too many changes actually. Zap now works on many more targets other than humanoids. In fact, it works on practically anything other than mechanicals. There's another new ability, Tricks of the Trade. Think misdirection, but for a melee class and straight up better. It's a short 30-second cooldown and lasts 6 seconds, during which time it will redirect all of your threat to the chosen target and increase their damage by 15% for the duration. Uses of this vary quite a bit. Sometimes raids choose to have 2 rogues who would tricks each other on cooldown to bounce their threat out and give themselves a nice damage buff. Sometimes it's just common sense to put it on a tank so they can build threat quickly on a new target. You can also glyph this ability to last 4 more seconds, and the tier 10 2 set makes it give you 15 energy instead of costing that much. You could in theory have 3 rogues with Tricks of the Trade glyphed, giving one member of your raid team a permanent 15% damage buff. It sounds like something past enthusiasts would end up at least experimenting with. Hey, at least the raid would be guaranteed 3 rogues if this was the case, but I don't expect many people to really do this in practice. And your tank's threat would have to be absolutely insane to be keeping up, but it's just something to think about. Let's talk raiding and the PvE talent changes. For this I'll be covering both Assassination and Combat, as the rogue has 2 fully viable playstyles, which will vary depending on your preference, as well as which tier and gear is currently available. I'll start with the Assassination or Mutilate spec, whichever you want to call it, because this specialization is more or less brand new, as it was entirely unused throughout the duration of TBC. In fact, rogues in PvE have been combat spamming Sinister Strike since day 1 of Classic. Finally, things change. And the talent tree is very much going to reflect that, as there's been an enormous amount of stuff which has had to change to make it work. Here is an example talent tree. Let's talk about the new stuff. Blood Spatter gives your bleed some extra damage. Vigor has been moved all the way up in the tree from where it used to be during TBC. And improved poisons gets mega buff buffed. It used to just increase the chance to apply poisons by 10%. Now it's 20% more chance to apply deadly poison and 50% for instant poison. Murder has also moved a little down the tree and is now a flat 4% damage increase. Deadly Brute is a new talent to the tree and is more of a PvP thing. Basically makes it so you get to apply crippling poison without actually having to have it active. Overkill is yet another new talent, which makes you generate a lot more energy in stealth and for 20 seconds afterwards. We'll have to see how this interacts with the likes of Vanish or the updated version of Night Elf's Shadow Meld, which works in the same way as Vanish. There's a chance you'll be able to proc this talent multiple times per fight, or maybe not. The beta will tell us for sure when it's out. Find Weakness has also just changed from damage after you use a finishing move to just do more damage in general. Focused attacks gives Assassination a lot more energy generation over the course of a fight, and Master Poisoner is yet another new talent. Yes, Assassination really needed this much help. This applies a 3% crit debuff on the target, which otherwise can only be done by Retribution Pally or an Elemental Shaman, as well as decreasing the duration of poisons on you by half, which I'm sure has some niche uses here and there. And most importantly, it makes it so Envenom doesn't consume your deadly poison and absolutely delete your DPS anymore, which is amazing. Turn the Tables looks fairly decent, but we haven't taken it here, and we're going to see why when we look at the talents in the other trees in a moment. What Cut to the Chase does is remove Slice and Dice from your regular rotation and just make it into a one-time button press at the start of a fight, and then you forget about it. The bottom of the tree is the winner for the most boring bottom of talent tree ability in the entire game. Hunger for 5% more damage. Look, it's nice and all, but I'm looking over there at classes like Warriors with Bladestorm and Titan's Grip, and it's good obviously, and you can glyph it to be 8% more damage, which is a lot of flat damage, and you should be able to proc it off any bleeds such as Marksman Hunters who will be spamming bleeds or Warriors. It's really effective, but it's just not terribly exciting. Over in the combat tree, we're really only after Lightning Reflexes for that 10% extra melee haste, which means more poisons being applied, more focused attack procs, and just more consistent damage, which is what Assassination is all about. Finally, in the subtree, 2 points are spent for a little bit more damage on some of your abilities. Assassination rogues use glyphs such as Mutilate, Hunger for Blood, and the third is a bit of a flex. In this case, I went for Fan of Knives for a bit more AoE. If, however, you prefer to stay with Combat Rogue, which you may end up playing later on in the expansion for reasons we'll get onto in a moment, then we should also take a look at that. Improved Slice and Dice now increases its duration by 50% for only 2 talent points, and Riposte will also now generate a combo point, which is a nice little leveling change you should think about. Sword Specialization has been renamed to Hack and Slash and still gives a chance to gain a bonus swing with either a sword or an axe now. Mace Specialization now makes them ignore armor instead of having a chance to stun, and fist weapons have been added into the daggers talent and gives more crit. Blade Twisting has had 10% damage added onto certain abilities so that literally anybody takes this talent for the first time ever, and Vitality increases energy regeneration by a huge 25%, which is really gonna smooth out your rotation. Throwing Specialization is a new addition and increases the range of your, well, ranged abilities and adds an interrupt to deadly throw, similar to what the PvP gloves did in TBC. Unfair Advantage is another more leveling oriented talent, and Savage Combat is a valuable debuff that adds 4% physical damage taken to the target. Only either a combat rogue or an arms warrior can apply this. Right near the bottom of the tree, Prey on the Weak, which should essentially just be a flat 20% bonus crit damage on the majority of enemies you're facing. And finally, Combat gets a very exciting and historically very buggy ability, Killing Spree. Teleport between enemies, attacking in rapid succession, and then hopefully don't land somewhere where you fall through the floor or disconnect, which is how it's worked on retail for years. When it works though, it adds to Combat Rogue's super cleave heavy kit and is really satisfying to fire off. Combat Rogues consider glyphs such as Killing Spree to lower that cooldown massively, Sinister Strike to give it a chance to add an extra combo point, and the third one again is a bit up in the air. Here I've gone for Tricks of the Trade for a bit more duration on it. So that's a little bit of a PvE talent overview, but how do we think rogues are going to perform overall in Wrath Classic? As per usual, I have to mention this, take this with a grain of salt. This is based off my experiences, conversations with others, and my own personal research. I think rogues will be overall in a much better spot than TBC, if I'm honest. I can't see a raid ever running without at least one, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having more than one of them either. Now that Assassination is not absolutely useless, you want somebody in your raid to be picking up those daggers when they end up dropping. Speaking of Assassination, they are expected to be one of the most consistently high DPS throughout the entire expansion. The gearing requirements they have to be able to start pumping great damage is also very low, and they scale well. However, their damage is super single target focused, and the nature of applying deadly poison stacks and having to build combo points means they're even weaker than rogues usually are at target switching. Also, they are how can I put this? One of the most straightforward specializations in the game. They don't have a big cooldown to pop, they just kind of choose a target and hit it very hard with a very simple rotation. I'd say Assassination could be a good spec if you like to perform well in raid, but also like to pop some real life consumables during your raid, if you know what I mean. As the expansion progresses and more armor penetration gear begins to become available in Ulduar and beyond, it's expected many rogues will look to make the swap over to combat, as it should eventually begin to outscale the pure single target of Assassination, and by Icecrown Citadel, combat should be pulling comfortably ahead, though Assassination is still very consistent and I can see them beating combat out on single target fights for a large portion of the expansion. Either way, both specializations should be viable in a raid comp, and it'll be down to you to pick one that fits better. In any event, rogues get more utility through tricks of the trade, valuable debuffs from Master Poisoner and Savage Combat, and more consistent damage throughout the expansion. I think rogue should be a pretty good steady choice for a melee. That's about enough on PvE though, I reckon. Time to talk arena. So in TBC, rogues and arena are simply put massively overpowered. The sheer amount of CC, burst, mobility, utility, and just damage they put out is questionable how they ever made it to live service like that. In Wrath, as many other things do, this changes quite a lot. Their damage distribution is different, as is their survivability and just their general playstyle. Gone are the days of chasing people around spamming Hemorrhage. In Wrath, instead, you're going to be using daggers. Also, rogues aren't about applying that constant pressure and building up wound poison stacks. Now they are way more burst focused, and on top of that, a lot squishier than they currently are. Average rogues will find themselves getting deleted in a few seconds when out of position, whilst experienced rogues still have an amazing toolkit to outplay and outmaneuver their enemies. Finally, before we take a look at talents, there kind of is an Assassination PvP spec, and it kind of plays like how the TBC version of rogue does, where you just pick a target and hit them and do a lot of damage, but it's just missing so many tools that Subtlety has, and we've looked at the majority of the Assassination talents. So I think for this we're just going to look at sub. Relentless Strikes is now at the top of the Subtlety tree and is a 5-point talent. Elusiveness also gets changed. It used to reduce the cooldown on Blind and Vanish by 90 seconds, now both of those are reduced by 60 seconds, but it also makes Cloak of Shadows come up 30% faster as well. So this means there is no more auto win on the second Blind anymore against a wide range of comps, as Blind will now share a cooldown with the PvP trinket. Serrated Blade reduces a percentage of target's armor instead of a flat amount. Emo gets bonus damage scaling when using a dagger, and Initiative has changed to be a 100% chance to add a combo point for some more consistent openers and damage. Premeditation has been removed from Preparation, but its cooldown has been lowered from 2 minutes all the way down to 20 seconds. Waylay is a brand new talent and adds an attack speed and move speed slow to your backstab and ambush abilities. I've put 1 point here in Honor Among Thieves. It should proc fairly often when in group PvP, and when considering that some damage over time and heal over time effects can crit now, that should also add into it. Stealthy Tricks is another new talent and largely removes the energy cost from a bunch of utility spells the rogue has, as well as reducing the cooldown on Preparation to 5 minutes total. Slaughter from the Shadows makes it so your backstab and ambush are much more spammable during a burst window, as well as increasing all damage by 5%. And at the bottom of the tree we have Shadow Dance, a short 1 minute cooldown that allows you to use stealth abilities for 6 seconds regardless of actually being in stealth or not. This adds a huge amount of utility and just brand new combos for the rogue to try out, between applying a Garrote Silence to somebody not expecting it, catching a healer who's trying to drink with a sap, and just so much more. At the top of the combat tree I've also taken Improved Gouge for even more CC. Subtlety rogues can use a bunch of different glyphs depending on what kind of comps you're facing. I've decided here to go with ones like Preparation for even more CC and disruption, Shadow Dance for an extra global or two out of stealth, as well as Gouge to make this utility ability ability even better. Between an insane toolkit of CC such as Kick, Gouge, Garrote, Cheap Shot, Kidney Shot, utility and mobility like Blind and Shadow Step, and strong burst damage from Ambush and Backstab, rogues just don't ever stop being a great PvP class, and they continue to be viable across a wide range of comps such as Roguelock Shaman or the inevitably forever viable Rogue Mage Priest. Ending off on the tier sets for the Rogue then, tier 7 from the revamped Naxxramas, Eye of Eternity and Sartharian's Lair is the Bone Scythe Battle Gear, and as per all the copy-paste tier 3 gear, it's awesome in the looks department. 2 set is 10% more damage on Rupture. At this point in the expansion, I would imagine all the rogues will be Assassination, so that's a little bit of bonus damage for you. The 4 set reduces the cost of your combo building moves by 5%, which in real terms means Mutilate costs 3 less energy, so yeah, not great. Tier 8, the Terrorblade Battle Gear from Ulduar. I like this set, it's a good mix of spooky and roguey. I also like the whippy shoulder things, it just kind of stands out on it. 2 set means you get 1 energy each time Deadly Poison deals damage, which is okay. It scales in AoE situations where you can proc it via Fan of Knives, and on single target it's a marginal energy gain. 4 set means 20% more Rupture damage, which means somebody at Blizzard really likes this ability, as we will continue to see with tier 9. These are either Garona or Van Cleef's Battle Gear. Let's not talk about how tier 9 looks and move straight onto the bonuses. 2-piece, a chance on Rupture tick to reduce the cost of your next ability by 40 energy, which sounds pretty good until I went to check on the proc chance and found it's 2%. So it's not good. The 4 set is 5% crit chance on various combo builders, particularly nice with Mutilate since it scales up with Seal Fate's ability to generate extra combo points. Ending off in tier 10, the Shadow Blades Battle Gear. It looks kind of like a Halloween costume went wrong. I don't know, that Geist Hood always looked goofy to me. The 2 set makes Tricks of the Trade grant 15 energy instead of costing 15, which is really nice. You were already pressing this button so somebody else can get 15% damage out of it, or for the threat generation, now you get a benefit personally as well from doing so. The 4 set makes it so melee finishing moves have a 13% chance to add 3 combo points to your target. What a weird random selection of numbers. Sometimes you can pop off if it's proccing back to back, other times it just doesn't really do anything. I'd prefer something a bit more consistent than that. So now we've had a look at the PvE, various specializations, new abilities, PvP and tier sets. Can we give an answer to Rogue in Wrath of the Lich King Classic? How broken is it now? It's in a pretty damn good state. I would actually say Assassination seems pretty broken when you can push incredibly high DPS with super low gearing requirements. Combat though should take over later as more armor penetration gear becomes available, yet both should be competitive. Rogues are now much more wanted across PvE content and are an asset to bring to raid with Tricks of the Trade and a number of valuable debuffs, and people won't spend half the expansion memeing them anymore like they did in TBC, that is for sure. In PvP they remain an absolute powerhouse of a class, yet I think they get more difficult to play due to being squishier and having to focus more around burst windows rather than following somebody around spamming hemo. Despite all this, guilds won't be jumping at the chance to stack rogues by any means, and I don't think a version of World of Warcraft exists where loads of people don't want to play this class for obvious reasons, so do expect a bit of competition when looking for those raid spots. And that is the Rogue in Wrath. Let me know your thoughts on whether you'll be giving this class a go as a main or as an alt. I reckon it'll be a pretty solid choice. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you all in the next one very soon.